Long live the king.
Mabagiti baba.
What is up, everybody? Random Man here, bringing you my review for the 2019 remake of The Lion King. Based on the traditionally animated 1994 Disney film of the same name, the plot of this musical film basically follows Simba, voiced by both J.D. McCrary and Donald Glover, a young lion who must embrace his role as the rightful king of his native land, following the murder of his father, Mufasa, voiced by James Earl Jones, at the hands of his uncle, Scar, voiced by Chiwetel Ejiofor. Going into this movie, I honestly did not know what to expect. One could say that I had moderate expectations of sorts going in, as on the one hand, this is yet another reimagining of a Disney classic. This is the third one of the year, actually. We had Dumbo and Aladdin in the last few months in the first half of 2019, and those two films I actually enjoyed. And with The Lion King, which I have watched a gazillion times as a kid and remains to this day as one of my absolute favorites in the Disney Renaissance era of films. So with the advent of a bunch of these live-action Disney remakes having been released across this decade, one would expect The Lion King to be one of the titles that would be reimagined as well, and now we have gotten it 25 years after the original. This was also going to be a tall order to fill because, like I said, I love The Lion King, as do many other people. And it's often considered to be not just one of the best animated films made by Disney, but one of the best animated films, period. And looking at all of the live-action Disney remakes, I have enjoyed to loved the ones that we have gotten. And I'm mainly talking about remakes of Disney classics. So I'm excluding stuff like the 2010 Alice in Wonderland film and its sequel, Alice Through the Looking Glass, Maleficent, Christopher Robin, and Mary Poppins Returns, as much as I really enjoyed some of those films. One detail that did make me optimistic for this Lion King remake was the director at the helm. This film is directed by Jon Favreau, who has such a versatile range when it comes to him behind the camera. He has made movies such as 2003's Elf, which is probably my favorite Christmas movie ever made. He has also made 2008's Iron Man, which needs no introduction, as it kickstarted the biggest film franchise of all time with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And he has also previously helmed one of the live-action Disney remakes, the 2016's The Jungle Book, which inevitably would see The Lion King use similar technology with the animals being created with CGI, which also made me optimistic for the film too, in having a realistic look that would make me enveloped within the world of the Pride Land like the original film so created. Starting out with the cast and their vocal performances, we have a stacked one, as this was another detail that made me optimistic for this Lion King remake, as we have a bunch of notable players here voicing some of the characters we know and love. I want to start out with some of my favorites, which include Seth Rogen and Billy Eichner as Pumbaa and Timon. Oh my god, they are hilarious here. Such perfect casting. And I think that their vocal performances had a lot of life and energy to them that is displayed with how their characters act and just their interactions with other characters too, notably Simba. It echoed a lot of what was done so greatly with them in the original Lion King film. And then we have other players, such as one notable returning one, James Earl Jones as Mufasa. Now, on the one hand, that is amazing to see him still alive with us to reprise the role of this iconic character and his booming voice. And here, it's great to hear him say some of the same lines that were done with the original film. Though notably, he is sounding a bit tired and older. I mean, it's been 25 years since the original film. But yeah, Mufasa is a character that you cannot have voiced by anyone else other than James Earl Jones. And then the voice of his wife, Sarabi, we have Alfre Woodard, another legendary. She was very good here. John Oliver is also one of my favorites. He's the voice of Zazu, and I thought he did his own thing without copying Rowan Atkinson's take on the character 25 years ago. Yeah, I thought he was another great choice here. Then we have some of the main players, specifically the lions. We have Simba, who is voiced by two actors. We have J.D. McCreary as the younger version of Simba, and I thought he did well for what he had to do. And then we have Donald Glover, aka Childish Gambino, as the adult Simba. Now, I think he is a good actor when given the right role, and here, I thought he was fine. Sometimes it felt like he was just reading lines that he was recording for this character. To me, it just felt like talent like him and Beyonce, or as she's credited here, Beyonce Knowles Carter, who voices adult Nala. I felt like it was their casting that was mainly done to warrant having some duets be done with them, as they are great singers. I'm not denying their talent there. But in terms of them as voice actors, they could have done more to have some expression be done, like with Billy Eichner and Seth Rogen as Timon and Pumbaa. And then I've also got to give a shout out to Shahidi Wright Joseph as young Nala, just like J.D. McCreary did as young Simba. And then other people here and there include the likes of John Kani as Rafiki. Some of the hyenas are voiced by Florence Kasumba, Keegan-Michael Key, Eric Andre. It's great to hear their voices in the film as well, and I thought that they did serviceable jobs. But I think that the standouts here with the vocal cast include the likes of Billy Eichner, Seth Rogen, and John Oliver. The writing in this film by Jeff Nathanson, who did the screenplay, cannot be broken down to more simple terms other than the fact that it's basically the same story as what was seen and loved with the original Lion King film. It's really no more basic than that. I mean, the original film had 3 writers for its screenplay and a crap ton of people who worked on its story, but with this one lone screenwriter, he basically had an easy job in just taking the basic beat-for-beat elements from the original and putting them into a new screenplay that would accommodate a bunch of the computer animation that is done with this film and its flowing narrative. So really, all I have left to talk about in the way this movie is helmed is how it is done with its animation and the all-around directing from Jon Favreau. Now, I think that him and the rest of the talented animators behind this film had such a gargantuan task to make this movie look as realistic as possible, given how it is made up of complete CGI sequences. Literally, you see nothing but computer-generated imagery that compose the visuals of this film. Favreau did mention before the movie was released that one shot of this movie is not CGI, and I, for one, can probably guess what it is, and it's literally the opening shot with the sun rising, and then, you know, the iconic opening of the original Lion King ensues with the same Circle of Life track. Yeah, but either way, with the way this movie is helmed with the animation, it is remarkably rendered, as it is technically, literally, it is technically an animated film through and through. And it's so realistic looking. It looked like something out of a nature special, if you would, both in good and bad, which I'll mention in a bit, and if you want to get specific as well, kind of like a Disney nature film too. Like this one shot that is one of the more memorable ones of the film comes with this little marsupial looking creature. I don't know, it looked like a lemur or something. It was jumping up in slow motion to catch an insect and eat it. It looked like something I would see in a nature documentary. I have to give huge props to Favreau and company for making something as visually astonishing as this film. And it's an achievement to say the least too. The possibilities for creating something from scratch with a computer are basically endless with the use of this technology for film going forward. That being said though, it also backfires on the movie too, in that the filmmakers shot themselves in the foot by making the movie look so realistic at points that it also lacked emotion, specifically with the characters. And given how all these characters are anthropomorphic animals and they are speaking like humans do, moving their mouths and moving like how animals would move in real life, I didn't feel that big of a connection with these characters. There wasn't much emotion being shown with how these characters are saying the words that they are saying and showing it as they are showing it on their faces. The correlation I thought was disconnected, and part of it also has to do with the voice acting. As I mentioned, that some of the voice acting I wasn't a fan of and some of it I was a fan of, and the hot and cold nature of it I thought clashed with what this movie was doing in telling some of its dialogue, some of the same iconic lines as the original film, and also with some of the actions in the way it goes, beat for beat, just like the original. And speaking of that too, this movie is, like I said, with the writing, straight up basically the same as The Lion King from 1994. And there are differences in there. I mean, there are superficial auxiliary differences that I can point out, but really the overwhelming majority of this movie just follows the same motions as the original film. Even with that though, I was curious to see what would be altered or changed with this movie's narrative flow. And when it comes to memorable moments from the original film, some are either extended or shortened depending on the scene. And one of them that is notably shortened is the Be Prepared musical number, which was done so brilliantly in the original, even with its Nazi-esque imagery. In the remake, it is shortened and simply didn't have the same oomph as the original. This probably has to do with the fact that it originally wasn't supposed to be in this remake. I guess it was just thrown in there for the sake of fan service, nostalgia, or all-around appeasement. But yeah, there is that. And speaking of the Be Prepared sequence, I have neglected to mention the vocal performance of Scar, as played by Chiwetel Ejiofor, as I mainly thought his performance was fine, but some of his dialogue and line execution, like the Be Prepared sequence itself, didn't have the same oomph factor, the same menace, or same amount of sinister nature as with what Jeremy Irons did in the original film. This is where I also connect Ejiofor's performance as Scar to the rest of the film in it not having the same impact or emotional factor as the original movie, because, like I mentioned before, I felt it lacked emotion with the animation being too realistic for its own good and not making me connect with the characters, but also just in the way certain scenes are framed and all around parlayed on us. The scene where Mufasa dies, and I already spoiled that in the beginning of this review. If you haven't seen the original Lion King film, what are you doing? As I said, this remake basically is a beat for beat, almost shot for shot remake of the original. But anyway, with Mufasa's death, the execution of that scene didn't have the same gravity either. I mentioned this too because in the way it is staged, choreographed, animated, whatever, I almost laughed. I'm dead serious. I almost laughed. Like as soon as Scar lets go of Mufasa's paws and then he's falling to his inevitable death, I almost laughed. As it is done similarly to the original, right down to where Simba is screaming and seeing his father fall to his death, with it zooming out to such a dramatic effect. I felt in the way it was executed here, uh, it was overtly cheesy, and like I said, I almost laughed. I'm laughing right now, but with me not having an emotional connection to this movie as much as I did with the original, some could say that, well, Favreau's remake of The Jungle Book had animated animals that didn't have much emotion or expression on their faces either. But the difference is that we had Neil Setty's performance as Mowgli, the lone human character of the film, be a proxy and all-around main audience connector to the rest of the animals in this film, thus creating some more emotional engagement, at least in my opinion, along with the rest of the visuals of that film that won it an Oscar, and with The Lion King in comparison, on top of it being a rehash of what was done with the unachievable greatness of the original, it just left me cold, to put it simply, on that front. And when it comes to the rest of the technical merits with this film, the music as composed by Hans Zimmer, as he did for the original film and won some Oscars for, I thought he did a good job with the music here too, though it did sound like a lot of it was just taken from the original film, either re-recorded or just literally played over the footage for this remake. There are some new songs in this film. There's one performed by Beyonce called Spirits, and I thought it was decent. The way some iconic songs from the original are implemented here, I thought were mostly done in a nice fashion. And then there's a new song composed by Elton John, who did win an Oscar for the original Lion King film as well, and his song is played over the credits. I also thought it ran along fine at its almost 2-hour running time. That makes it about 30 minutes longer than the original film, and pacing-wise, I didn't feel much of a difference, I guess, mainly because some sequences are either shortened or extended. But either way, yeah, I felt that the movie passed the time. But in retrospect, that isn't a good thing for me to say, as this is a remake of something so much more superior. And I felt like that this is a movie that not only did not need to exist, as with the rest of the live-action Disney remakes, we always have the originals to hold near and dear to our hearts, but with the Lion King remake specifically, I felt like it just went the way of just doing something the same as what was done before, but having a bigger selling point on having photorealistic CGI animation instead of the traditionally hand-drawn 2D animation of the original. To me, this movie is mediocre at best. It's meh, middle of the road, middling territory. And this is the first remake of a Disney classic that I just felt like it did just feel like the same. As I found some praiseworthy elements of the other remakes that we have gotten across the decade of Disney films. Like I've said, I enjoyed Dumbo. I liked Aladdin a little more than that film too. So it's a bit of a surprise to me that I ended up enjoying Aladdin the most out of the 3 remakes of Disney classics that we have gotten this year, and that The Lion King is the one I've liked the least. In terms of recommending this movie, if you know what you're going to get into, as this movie so blatantly marketed all over the place, and you're a huge fan of the original, then you're going to get what you're going to expect. With it being the same story, just done differently on a visual front. But if you're like me, somebody who expected more with a remake like this, and given the actual definition of the term remake, in it doing something differently from the original, saying it is underwhelming is not necessarily an understatement, but it's something that I felt was unnecessary to boot, and all around feeling like it was just there for Disney to get more green, really. I mean, watching it overall, I was mildly entertained by it. I don't think it will do much harm. if any kid watches this movie as their first exposure to the Lion King film, but I feel like for generations to come, more people will see the 1994 classic over this movie, and that this remake won't be remembered in the near future. My final verdict for The Lion King is 2.5 out of 5 stars. Thank you all, as always, for watching. Be sure to like this video, comment on what you thought of The Lion King. Social media links in the description. Subscribe to my channel for more, and I'll catch you on the next movie review.